Hi students, I'm going to read another chapter of Baseball in April by Gary Soto. And the chapter is called La Bamba. Manuel was the fourth of 7 children and looked like a lot of the kids in his neighborhood. Black hair, brown face, and skinny legs, scuffed from summer play. But summer was giving way to fall. The trees were turning red, the lawns brown, and the pomegranate trees were heavy with fruit. Manuel walked to school in the frosty morning, kicking leaves and thinking of tomorrow's talent show. He was still amazed that he had volunteered. He was going to pretend to sing Richie Valens' La Bamba before the entire school. Why did I raise my hand? He asked himself, but in his heart he knew the answer. He yearned for the limelight. He wanted applause as loud as a thunderstorm, and to hear his friends say, "Man, that was bad." And he wanted to impress the girls, especially Petra Lopez, the second prettiest girl in his class. The prettiest was already taken by his friend Ernie. Manuel knew he should be reasonable, since he himself was not great looking, just average. Manuel kicked through the fresh fallen leaves. When he got to school, he realized he had forgotten his math workbook. If the teacher found out, he would have to stay after school and miss practice for the talent show. But fortunately for him, they did drills that morning. During lunch, Manuel hung around with Benny, who was also in the talent show. Benny was going to play the trumpet in spite of the fat lip he had gotten playing football. "How do I look?" Manuel asked. He cleared his throat and started moving his lips in pantomime. No words came out, just a hiss that sounded like a snake. Manuel tried to look emotional, flailing his arms on the high notes and opening his eyes and mouth as wide as he could when he came to "Para bailar la bamba." After Manuel finished, Benny said it looked all right, but suggested Manuel dance while he sang. Manuel thought for a minute and decided it was a good idea. "Yeah, just think you're like Michael Jackson or something like that," Benny suggested, "but don't get carried away." During rehearsal, Mr. Roybal, nervous about his debut at the school as the school talent coordinator, cursed his breath when the lever that controlled the speed on the record player jammed. "Darn," he growled, trying to force the lever. "What's wrong with you?" "Is it broken?" Manuel asked, bending over for a closer look. It looked all right to him. Mr. Roybal assured Manuel that he would have a good record player at the talent show, even if it meant bringing his own stereo from home. Manuel sat in a folding chair, twirling his record on his thumb. He watched a skit about personal hygiene, a mother and daughter violin duo, five first-grade girls jumping rope, a karate kid breaking boards, 3 girls singing like a virgin, and a skit about pilgrims. If the record player hadn't been broken, he would have gone after the karate kid. An easy act to follow, he told himself. As he twirled his 45 record, Manuel thought they had a great talent show. The entire school would be amazed. His mother and father would be proud, and his brothers and sisters would be jealous and pout. It would be a night to remember. Benny walked onto the stage, raised his trumpet to his mouth, and waited for his cue. Mr. Roybal raised his hand like a symphony conductor and let it fall dramatically. Benny inhaled and blew so loud that Manuel dropped his record, which rolled across the cafeteria floor until it hit a wall. Manuel raced after it, picked it up, and wiped it clean. "Boy, I am glad it didn't break," he said with a sigh. That night, Manuel had to do the dishes and a lot of homework, so he could only practice in the shower. In bed, he prayed that he wouldn't mess up. He prayed that it wouldn't be like when he was a first grader. For Science Week, he had wired together a C battery and a bulb, and told everyone he had discovered how a flashlight worked. He was so pleased with himself that he practiced for hours, pressing the wire to the battery, making the bulb wink a dim orangish light. He showed it to so many kids in his neighborhood that when it was time to show his class how a flashlight worked, the battery was dead. He pressed the wire to the battery, but the bulb didn't respond. He pressed until his thumb hurt, and some kids in the back started snickering. But Manuel fell asleep, confident that nothing would go wrong this time. The next morning, his father and mother beamed at him. They were proud that he was going to be in the talent show. "I wish you would tell us what you're doing," his mother said. His father, a pharmacist who wore a blue smock with his name on a plastic rectangle, looked up from the newspaper and sided with his wife. "Yes, what are you doing in the talent show?" "You'll see," Manuel said with his mouth full of Cheerios. The day whizzed by, and so did his afternoon chores and dinner. Suddenly, he was dressed in his best clothes and standing next to Benny backstage, listening to the commotion as the cafeteria filled with school kids and parents. The lights dimmed, and Mr. Roybal, sweaty in a tight suit and a necktie with a large knot, wet his lips and parted the stage curtains. "Good evening, everyone," the kids behind the curtain heard him say. "Good evening to you," some of the smart alecky kids said back to him. "Tonight we'll bring you the best John Burroughs Elementary has to offer. I'm sure that you'll both be pleased." Sorry about that. Let me try that again. "Tonight we'll bring you the best John Burroughs Elementary has to offer, and I'm sure that you'll be both pleased and amazed that our little schoolhouse has so much talent. And now, without further ado, let's get on with the show." He turned, and with a swish of his hand, commanded, "Part the curtain." The curtains parted in jerks. A girl dressed as a toothbrush, and a boy dressed as a dirty gray tooth walked onto stage and sang, "Brush, brush, brush, floss, 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 gargle the germs away, hey, hey, hey." After they finished singing, they turned to Mr. Roybal, who dropped his hand. The toothbrush dashed around the stage after the dirty tooth, which was laughing and having a great time, until it slipped and nearly rolled off the stage. Mr. Roybal jumped out and caught it just in time. "Are you okay?" the dirty tooth answered. "Ask my dentist," which drew laughter and applause from the audience. A violin duo played next, and except for one time when the girl got lost, they sounded fine. People applauded, and some even stood up when the first grade girls maneuvered onto the stage while jumping rope. They were all smiles and bouncing ponytails as 100 cameras flashed at once. Mothers awed and fathers sat up proudly. The Karate Kid was next. He did a few kicks, yells, and chops, and finally, when his father held up a board, punched it in two. The audience clapped and looked at each other, wide-eyed with respect. The boy bowed to the audience, and father and son ran off the stage. Manuel remained behind the stage, shivering with fear. He mouthed the words to La Bamba and swayed from left to right. Why did he raise his hand and volunteer? Why couldn't he have just sat there like the rest of the kids and not said anything? While the Karate Kid was on stage, Mr. Roybal, more sweaty than before, took Manuel's 45 record and placed it on the new record player. "You ready?" Mr. Roybal asked. "Yeah." Mr. Roybal walked back on stage and announced that Manuel Gomez, a 5th grader in Mrs. Knight's class, was going to pantomime Richie Valens' classic hit, La Bamba. The cafeteria roared with applause. Manuel was nervous, but loved the noisy crowd. He pictured his mother and father applauding loudly, and his brothers and sisters also clapping, though not as energetically. Manuel walked on stage, and the song started immediately. Glassy-eyed from the shock of being in front of so many people, Manuel moved his lips and swayed in a made-up dance step. He couldn't see his parents, but he could see his brother Mario, who was a year younger, thumb-wrestling with his friend. Mario was wearing Manuel's favorite shirt. He would deal with Mario later. He saw some other kids get up and head for the drinking fountain, and a baby sitting in the middle of the aisle, sucking her thumb and watching him intently. "What am I doing here?" thought Manuel. "This is no fun at all." Everyone was just sitting there. Some people were moving to the beat, but most were just watching him, like they would a monkey at the zoo. But when Manuel did a fancy dance step, there was a burst of applause, and some girls screamed. Manuel tried another dance step. He heard more applause and screams, and started to get into the groove as he shivered and snaked like Michael Jackson around the stage. But the record got stuck, and he had to sing "Para bailar la bamba, para bailar la bamba, para bailar la bamba, para bailar la bamba," again and again. Manuel couldn't believe his bad luck. The audience began to laugh and stand up in their chairs. Manuel remembered how the 45 record had dropped from his hand and rolled across the cafeteria floor. It probably got scratched, he thought, and now it was stuck, and he was stuck dancing and moving his lips to the same words over and over. He had never been so embarrassed. He would have to ask his parents to move the family out of town. After Mr. Roybal ripped the needle across the record, Manuel slowed his dance steps to a halt. He didn't know what to do except bow to the audience, which applauded wildly, and scoot off the stage, on the verge of tears. This was worse than the homemade flashlight. At least no one laughed. They just snickered. Manuel stood alone, trying hard to hold back the tears, as Benny, center stage, played his trumpet. Manuel was jealous because he sounded great, then mad as he recalled that it was Benny's loud trumpet playing that made the 45 record fly out of his hands. But when the entire cast lined up for a curtain call, Manuel received a burst of applause that was so loud it shook the walls of the cafeteria. Later, as he mingled with the kids and parents, everyone patted him on the shoulder and told him, "Way to go, you were really funny." Funny, Manuel thought. Did he do something funny? Funny, crazy, hilarious. These were the words people said to him. He was confused, but beyond caring. All that he knew is that people were paying attention to him, and his brothers and sisters looked at him with a mixture of jealousy and awe. He was going to pull Mario aside and punch him in the arm for wearing his shirt, but he cooled it. He was enjoying the limelight. A teacher brought him cookies and punch, and the popular kids, who had never before given him the time of day, now clustered around him. Ricardo, the editor of the school bulletin, asked him how he made the needle stick. "It just happened," Manuel said, crunching on a star-shaped cookie. At home, that night, his father, eager to undo the buttons on his shirt and ease into his lazy boy recliner, asked Manuel the same thing, how he managed to make the song stick on the words "Para bailar la bamba." Manuel thought quickly and reached for a scientific jargon that he'd read in magazines. "Easy, Dad. I used laser tracking with high optics and low functional decibels per channel." His proud but confused father told him to be quiet and go to bed. "Ah, que niños tan truchas," he said as he walked to the kitchen for a glass of milk. "I don't know how you kids these nowadays get so smart. Manuel, feeling happy, went to his bedroom, undressed, and slipped into his pajamas. He looked in the mirror and began to pantomime La Bamba, but stopped because he was tired of that song. He crawled into the bed. The sheets were as cold as the moon that stood over the peach tree in their backyard. He was relieved that the day was over. Next year, when they asked for volunteers for the talent show, he wouldn't raise his hand. Probably. Hope you enjoyed this chapter. Have a wonderful day.